Friday, December 29th, 2017. It's time for Progressive Washington with Rhonda Walker and Courtney and Love.
Welcome to Progressive Washington. I'm Rhonda Walker.
And I'm Courtney Love. We'll be joined by Brian Cheeseman and Oz a little later in the show.
On today's show, we're going to talk with Whole Washington. We've got Erin Jorgen, who is the Initiative Writing Committee Chair with us today, and Vicki Rhodes, a naturopath doctor and Interim Director of Outreach for Whole Washington. Next, of course, we will have our wonderful From the Land of Oz. Courtney, candidate to Courtney, we'll have Tambourine Borelli. She is a Congressional District 10 candidate. Brian Cheeseman will do an update on the article of the first, where Tambourine will again join in with a conversation with Tyler Vega. And then, of course, events at the end of the show. Welcome to our show today. We do have Whole Washington as our first guest. So please welcome Erin Jorgen.
Hi.
Hi, Erin.
My name's Erin Jorgen, and I'm the Initiative Committee Chair for Whole Washington, and we've put a lot of work in over the last year, and I'm really excited that we finally finished our study, and we're pretty excited by the results. So I'm here to talk about that today.
Wonderful. Sorry, I was trying to lead in a little bit. So with Whole Washington, we're working on a single-payer healthcare plan. We kind of after the national HR 676 and Bernie Sanders 1804 Medicare for All Act. And then also I wanted to bring in what's happening on in Washington State. Can you go into that a little bit, the bills that are in session right now?
So there are some bills in session right now, and they kind of consistently keep getting tabled. One is HB 1026, and that is the bill that we sort of built our initiative from. We felt it was missing a few elements, and so we built onto it. But there's also 4757, which is another single payer attempt. It's a lot longer than HB 1026, but it includes some revenue sources. And then there's a sister bill for HB 1026 in the Senate, which is 5701. And those bills get stalled in committee. And for those who don't understand the civic process, essentially how legislation is created is someone sponsors it, or co-sponsors sign it, and it goes to committee. And the committee is run by whichever party is in charge, has the majority in the House and Senate, and they get to kind of set the agenda, and it's never gotten out of committee. And so hopefully we have the Democrats have a narrow majority in now, and they get to set the agenda, but it is a short session. So the rumor is that it will still probably not get a hearing. Unless voters get really, really pumped up and really demand that it happen. That's part of the efforts that we're supporting right now, which is the legislature has an opportunity, even though it's a short session and it's complicated, they have an opportunity to have a hearing on it this session, and we support that.
Wonderful. And this, because of the process and how it can take so long, is why this ballot initiative, why you guys are going that route, correct? Because it's people-powered.
Yes.
If you want to go into that just a little bit.
Well, essentially, that's part of why we're taking it to the ballot. This is they'll have access to our approach too. They could give it a hearing and pass something in the legislature this session if they wanted to. But there's some economic cuts, very, very likely, to the federal programs. We have lots of concerned rural health providers and a lot of people that just don't have affordable options for health insurance. And we still have a few people that don't have health insurance at all. So our plan would be the next best step would be to pass a ballot initiative in 2018. And so we plan to keep applying pressure and file our ballot initiative when we can in about a week and a half.
Wonderful.
Or a week.
Right. I can't wait. So a couple things that people have asked. So we'll just go through quickly before we get to the nitty gritty of what's in the initiative as far as all that good stuff. So some questions is, will vision and dental be covered?
Yes. Yes. The only coverage that is really lacking as a concrete part of this plan is long-term care coverage. It does include a provision that would instruct them to provide at least what Medicaid provides now as far as eligibility and costs. But it also instructs them to look at the financial feasibility of including it by 2020 to produce a proposal to include it. So that's one element that's not inherently a part of this, but it is a part of the long-term discussion. And I'm a firm believer that if we can unify the approaches we take and make it more efficient, that we can add long-term in people there to push it that direction.
So with whole Washington, so current Washington healthcare cost projection for 2019, I saw was about $80 billion, with this new healthcare cost projection. It's looking about $70 billion. So there's what, over $10 billion of savings if this is able to go through?
Yes, the final study showed just a little over $9 billion in savings. So it's we round up just slightly. It's like 7.9 billion for what we're going to spend in 2009. So when you actually take it down, it's about 9 billion in savings. But that's with all the increase. We've increased coverage. We've eliminated copays and deductibles. That's the savings with all the new benefits.
Nice. So now for the nitty gritty. You sent me this beautiful slide here. Can you go into what this represents?
Well,
the individual and families.
Yes. Yeah. So the first graph there is the change in income after healthcare expenses, and essentially what that is when we approach the revenue section, there's some limitations to the state constitution as far as exemptions and as far as what kinds of taxes you can use. So we used a layered approach, and the goal was to get this kind of makeup, which is that people who pay into healthcare will 90% of them will pay significantly less under this system, and a small percentage will pay about the same. Of high earners will pay about the same, and then the top 0.1% will see the largest increase. This was really important to us because a big concern about adding new taxes was that our current tax system puts a lot of the burden on the middle class, and our current health system burden on the middle class. And so what we wanted to do was to ensure that we relieved as much of the burden as possible in the shift from out-of-pocket costs to revenues, taxes, and that it had no out-of-pocket costs for those who were the most vulnerable, children and low-income adults.
So the individuals earning under the 200%. Sorry, go into that.
What we get for that, with that change, all that savings, and then again, there are some people towards the higher end of the economic spectrum who will pay more for their health insurance costs in the end. But what it looks like is we get to provide health insurance to all children in the state who are under 19. We get to provide all those who are dual eligible for Medicare and Medicaid with reimbursements for the premiums they pay on their Medicare and no out-of-pocket costs or premiums for any of that group. All adults earning under 200% would also be covered without any out-of-pocket costs. And it doesn't matter where you currently get your insurance from, whether it's the marketplace or whatnot. We have this start immediately. This isn't something that's contingent on waivers or federal reg. You have to meet the same guidelines as an insurance company. The initiative does that.
Wonderful. We did kind of go through the ones that make over 200% already. So I'd like to talk about the business aspect, the small businesses, about the benefits that they could receive.
Right. Well, it was really important for us that we didn't overly burden small businesses. That would be, right now, that's under 25 employees that don't currently aren't required to provide insurance, while still making sure that those employees could get insurance. So what our plan does is it has an exemption for pay that phases out as the pay goes up. So as a person's quarterly pay goes up. And that would mean that most small businesses with under 25 employees would be able to insure their employees for little to nothing. Part-time employees would essentially not have it. Their entire pay would be exempt. So the reason we use that is because it mimics the expenses that people are currently paying. Now, the biggest savers are the ones who are small businesses paying for health insurance. They are paying by far the highest. We've had polls, a survey that showed it was anywhere between 20 and 55% for small businesses who wanted to cover their employees. So they would be reducing their costs down to less than 7% for most small businesses. And even large businesses, because of the exemption, would be reducing it to about 8% or less, depending on how their pay structure is. But the idea is that employees that are earning $60,000 a year or greater are probably already having some part of their insurance paid for. And that is costing on average 18% of payroll for employers. So we would be cutting that in half.
That's a big savings, actually. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is how are providers and hospitals, affected within this plan. There is a graph that we have that correlates with this. Could you elaborate on that?
Right. Well, what we're saving total as far as switching to a universal payment structure, what we save in total is like $16 billion. But we apply a bunch of that savings back into better coverage and covering everyone. So that's important to remember. When providers hear that 16 billion, the savings, they worry that that's going to come out of their pocket, their bottom line. And so one of the things we wanted to look at was what they're going to save under the new plan. And what we looked at here, this is $1 of reimbursement from an insurance company right now. For every dollar that an insurance company gets right now, they get to keep about 66% of it. 5%, which is relatively small, and it's a fairly small number of hospitals and unique or considered monopoly providers, but it's a small amount of profits that are lost to shareholders. And then there's a huge amount of loss in providers having to do way too much documentation and jump through way too many hoops to meet the requirements of all the different insurance companies. So, and then the top, you see a smaller yellow bracket. That is how much is going through billings and claim. That's how much they have to pay departments to get those reimbursements. Okay. So when you look over to what we're going to do with a unified single payment structure, the reason that the providers don't lose is because they get to keep 85 cents on the dollar now. They get to spend only about 13% time, 13% of their time doing documentation and jumping through hoops. So that's more time spent with patients doing reimbursable care. And that also means that if we just matched Medicare as far as administrative costs, we could get the hospital's costs down to about 2% on billing and claims.
Wow, so, there's a lot of work behind this.
It's a lot of work because we wanted to really be able to explain how this improves each person who's affected by it.
Wonderful. So how is the best way they can reach out and get more information? We're going to be moving on just real quick to Vicki coming up next with outreach to how to get involved that way. But to get involved with the initiative process or deeper into there, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, we are looking to keep getting feedback on the initiative that we have now. And there's a small amount of time in which people could give us some feedback that might result in some minor changes to the language. But we really would love some editors really dedicated. It's long, so it takes a lot of language to create that. But we'd love to have some editors who are willing to dedicate any amount of time to looking for any kind of grammatical mistakes, things like that. But the best thing to do is to email me, Erin@wholewashington.org, and I will find a way for you to help out with this process. We're going to need to form a subcommittee to make sure that we get through the filing process with dotted I's and crossed T's. So anyone willing to help us stay on track with that is welcome too.
Thank you so very much for joining us today, Erin. I really appreciate it. We want to do a quick, just a minute or two with Vicki next. She is the interim outreach director for Whole Washington, just to let you guys know how best to get involved as an individual, as a group. Hi, Vicki.
Hi.
So what's the best way to reach out or, to you to help build up what we need out here to get this passed?
Well, we certainly will entertain any suggestions or contacts that people have out there, people that we should be talking to, especially stakeholders like nurses or doctors groups. The best way to get in touch is via email, and Vicki@wholewashington.org. That's VICKI @wholewashington.org would work, but also outreach@wholewashington.org. Either one of those emails would work fine.
Wonderful. I wanted to try to get a little bit delve deeper into you, but our segment did go a little bit longer than expected. So I would love to look at having you on again in the future to delve a little bit deeper, if that's possible. I really thank you so much for coming on. We do need to look at visiting with candidates with Courtney next. We have an amazing candidate on, Tambourine Borelli. And I believe Courtney is ready to go. Are you ready, Miss Courtney?
I am.
And again, thank you, Whole Washington, for coming on today's show. Take it away, Courtney.
Thank you so much. Today we'll be joined by Tambourine Borelli, and we have a brief video to show to introduce her and her power.
She's definitely got some fire, that one.
She does.
We're leading the nation with issues like single payer, fight for a living wage, not just a minimum wage where you've got to get 2 and 3 jobs just to be comfortable, but a living wage, right? Everyone should be able to rest with a living wage and not be filled with anxiety about just basic needs. We fight for things like that, and we fight for things like housing first, right? Housing first. We should not, in 2017, still have fellow human beings, women, men, and children, babies, on the street. It shouldn't be in the greatest country of the world. It shouldn't be.
Courtney. Thanks for joining us. This is Tambourine Borelli.
Thank
The
you.
real tambourine. Uh, thank you. Can you tell us a little about the geography of your district, Tambourine?
For sure. So it encompasses Thurston County, which includes Olympia, Yelm, Rainier, Lacey. It juts up, grabs Shelton, just Shelton out of Mason County, and then it shoots over through Pierce County, which includes Roy down at the bottom, Lakewood, University Place up at the top, and some of Tacoma, and stops just short of the port.
Okay.
Basically, it spans 827 square miles, and the population is over 680,000 people.
Nice. Well, I'd like to hear a little bit about yourself, Tambourine. What's your life
as you guys know, we're having a camera issue. We've got Tambourine frozen on the screen. Sorry, everybody. We're trying to get this worked out, so I'll show some slides. Don't know what's going on there.
Hydrating myself.
We can hear. Yes, we see it. It's a nice selfie. We can hear you fine, though. So go ahead, keep talking. Let's hope that resolves.
It sounds like we're having some technical difficulties, but we'll get that worked out.
What would be an interview without technical difficulties, right?
Exactly.
It's with life. Everything worked through. So,
exactly.
Usually when people ask me that, I'll just talk about my political history in the last year. But some have said, you know what, we want to know about you. Like, where do you come from? What's your background? So I'll just quickly say that I'm immigrants on my dad's side. My mother is a multi-generational Angelino from Los Angeles, mixture of European immigrants and Native Americans. Jokes a lot that she's a Heinz 57, so she literally has almost every genetic DNA wrapped up. And I'm a daughter of an Army veteran and an entrepreneur. Followed in that throughout the first part of my life up until now as an entrepreneur, and basically every business that I began or started always had some root within it that was connected to service. In Los Angeles, I was a strength trainer, a life coach. When I came to Washington, I opened up a community center, a cafe, organic food, stage for the kids to have dance classes. And I was a leader of a skincare company, not the company, but a team within the company. And most recently, for animals, I do rescue. And so I started an organic pet treat company, which we're launching now within the country. So as far as politically speaking, I was always someone that never was interested, never got involved, because I never believed that the politicians were truly for the people. Until last year, obviously, Bernie Sanders opened up that window, and I felt with him something that I had never felt before. And so when I'm touched and inspired, I go all the way in. I'm a deputy field organizer for the campaign, a caucus site leader, a national delegate, and even ran for office last year. So that's pretty much brings us up to now. And
so you have people skills and animal skills.
Well,
we should send you to DC.
Pass it on.
Yes. So, mainstream media spends a lot of time talking about Russia. What do you and your neighbors, your constituents think about Russia?
I'll say this, that I don't know personally to what degree Russia had anything to do with anything, really. I've never seen any actual evidence, but here's what I do know. I do know that the people that I know and talk to, they don't care really about Russia. They don't care about anything else besides, regular people, everyday people. They're trying to just make it. They're trying to survive. They're trying to make sure they have enough money in their bank account to cover their bills. And then, the unexpected, if their well, stopped working, or if they had to go to the dentist because their tooth broke. They're concerned about everyday life and survival. So that's pretty much my take on, the magnitude that Russia plays in everyday people's lives.
All right. Well, so if your neighbors and your constituents are worried about basic needs more than Russia, what policy issues are you focusing on behalf of them?
Sure. So we all know one of the biggest topics is healthcare, right? We could name of things that are the hot topic issues that affect everyone's lives. But if you were to boil that down, if you were to boil it down in a root, the root of everything is corruption. So I'm really heavily focused in anti-corruption. I'm just recently of Represent Us in Thurston County. Because you know what? Until we deal with that, corruption, election reform, all of these things that tie our hands from actually affecting what the people want. And that it just brings me to the study that Princeton did in regard to not just since Citizens United in 2010, which most of us think, oh God, since that went through, it really all went to hell. But the truth is, we can go back, and in that study, it went back 40 years with data showing they measured, the popular issues of the people of those times in conjunction, juxtaposed to the actual legislation that was passed. And this is what they found. And I wrote it down just to make sure I got it word for word. Now listen to this, you guys. This is really telling the state in here. Quote, the preferences of the average American, which is us, right? Us, no matter what we call ourselves, Republican, Democrat, progressive, libertarian, whatever it is, us, the people, appear to only have a minuscule near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Now, if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what does.
Right. So they're not representing people. Who are they representing?
They're representing the people that are lining their pockets, the people that they spend 70% of their congressional time dialing for dollars for, so they have enough in their coffers to make sure that they're reelected to again represent them another 6 years, depending on if they're representative or in the Senate. That's what they're focused on, and that's what needs to change.
We do have some questions out there for Tambourine already, if you guys have a moment to take some.
Oh, yes, please.
Brian?
Right. So right now we've got a couple of questions. One from Our Revolution. Will she support a primary opponent of the corporate senators of Washington? And then there was, what does she think of the corporate senators of Washington?
Okay, so could you repeat the first part of that question? Would I support who?
Will you support a primary opponent of the corporate senators of Washington?
Well, depending on who that is, and if they are in alignment with the issues that the people are wanting, absolutely. I have no allegiance.
And what do you think of the corporate senators from Washington State right now?
I think what I think about every sitting and or so-called representative who takes the interests of corporations, those that are not in the interests of the people or the planet. I have no allegiance. I don't care who they are. My allegiance that I would lock arms with is anyone, I don't care who it is, that will stand in the face of Goliath to go up against that power that is for the time being, and fight for the things that are right, and fight for the things that the people want.
And then how are you different from your opponent, Tambourine?
Well, besides a bunch of zeros in the bank account, this is what's fundamentally different that that would interest and what the constituents of CD10 would need to know. How we differ is this. Never have my constituents would never have to beg me not support a trade deal like TPP, or to beg me to put support single payer, or any other bill. See, we've got it twisted around, and it's like the frog, you know, it's a slow boil that we don't really realize just how wrong it is that we, you know, accept the fact that it's twisted around. The representatives should be coming out and being with the people. What do you want me to support? Not me, you know, saying, oh, well, I'll think about it. I haven't read it. I mean, that lackadaisical, come beg me to do what you want. And at the end, I do what I want, unless it's election season. And the night before the election, I go ahead and throw you a bone because I want to get reelected. That's the fundamental that we're different. I would never put through a bill in the state of Washington, right? Washington, evergreen Washington. I would never support a bill that alleviated regulations for the environment. I would never support a bill that supported continual war, allowing the president to authorize war without Congress. I would never do that. I would never put a bill or support a bill that supported continuous support for fossil fuel industry. I would never do that. Fundamental difference.
Okay. And then you have a great passion about election reform. Can you tell us a little about your personal experience? I think there's a picture on a slide that I'd like to see.
Yeah. Okay. So last year, you know, I was heavily, as I said, involved in the Sanders campaign. And when I was in Philly, I connected with Election Justice USA, who I went on to become a member of the board. In firsthand knowledge within that primary, you know, an election, if over 3% of a quote unquote irregularity, the election is supposed to be decertified. Now, and I encourage you to go to electionjusticeusa.org and read that 100-page report on the primaries and see all the multiple states where there was upwards to over 20% of irregularities. So I was so, you know, heart and soul, I wanted that man to lead this country. And when I saw the election just taken from him, I realized just dire the situation is that throughout our country, we have machines that are proprietarily owned by Microsoft, that we can't even look at the results because of that proprietary ownership. We need to gut the electoral system, and we need to implement an open source system where we all can see, where we all can go and say you go to vote and the name comes up of who you want. You pick who you want. You get a receipt, which is your receipt you take home. So there's evidence of who you voted for, and then something that spits out that can be hand counted. I know we probably don't have time to get into it. Maybe we can do a separate show just on election reform, but it's really exciting what can be done to ensure that who and what you want to vote for is actually what's going to be counted and what's going to be implemented.
So I have a picture here of you sitting on a floor with a group of people with tape over your mouth.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Yeah, that was at the convention, the DNC convention, and that is when we walked out.
Excellent.
Heartbroken. We walked out into the media tent and did a sit-in there to show our
solidarity
for what was happening.
It gets me all verklempt. I remember feeling so passionately watching on the news. So
yeah,
thank you for being there. And
Indeed.
told me the most beautiful quote, coming up under the cover of darkness to spread light.
You wrote that down last night, I see.
I did, because it's just so perfect for how I see what we're doing. And so thank you. Thank you for coming up under the cover of darkness to spread the light.
Well,
we would absolutely like to extend another offer to Tambourine to come back on the show for sure for more interviews. Can't get enough, Tambourine.
Not at all.
My honor. Thank you so much for asking me to come on. It's truly my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Further questions?
Brian, anything from the public?
Let's see here. So there's a lot of people that really want you to run for Senate, it seems. They like the way that you're talking here.
You know what's funny about that?
We're talking about running against Cantwell and how you'd be great for that. People really like your message. Can I just say
really quickly?
Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Remember, you guys, when we were doing the Berniecrat interview and I was running for port at that time because no one else, there wasn't a progressive to run for port. And then at the end of it, I think it was Gigi that was like, would you consider running for Congress? And I was like, So you never know what the future brings. I just want to go wherever I'm needed.
There you go. We'll just keep bumping you into offices we need you in. So thank you so much for coming, Tambourine. And now I think we're off to Oz. Is that correct, Rhonda?
That is correct. We're gearing up for our wonderful Oz. Are you ready to go, Oz? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Maybe I should unmute my mic. First of all, Happy New Year. I've got my tie on. It's an impression, but anyway. The topic of the Land of Oz today is healthcare is a human right. And I'd like to start off by looking at the definition of what an establishment, means pertaining to a political party. Now, by Wikipedia's definition, a dominant group or elite that holds power or authority in a nation or an organization. Now, that organization would be Republicans or Democrats, the duopoly. Now, who controls the establishment representatives of this duopoly? I believe a more accurate question may be, who donates bribes? Who bribes? Oh, sorry, did I say that? Our representatives in the House and Senate to procure corporate and special interest-friendly legislation. Well, the answer is easy. You all know it. Insurance companies, real estate, lawyers and lobbyists, energy and natural resources, fossil fuels, and agribusiness, the factory farms that have been putting friends of mine out of business for the last couple of decades. Now, I've got 5 representatives here, or 4 candidates, and 1 incumbent Democrat, who is Susan DelBene. She's an establishment Dem incumbent. She's up in Washington's 1st congressional. Then I have Dorothy Gasquet. She's a Dem candidate in Washington's 3rd. I have Carolyn Long. She's a Dem candidate, an establishment Dem candidate in Washington's 3rd. I really have to say she's a pro-establishment Dem candidate because she hasn't been elected yet. Then we have one of our favorites, Sarah Smith, progressive candidate in Washington's 9th. And then Tambourine Borelli, who you just heard from, such passion. Way to go, Tambourine! Yeah, girl! And I took apart, I took quotes from each website from these individuals. Susan DelBene on healthcare. We must do more to make sure all Americans to affordable, quality healthcare. That's why I introduced legislation to extend the small business tax credit to help small businesses cover their workers. Well, that sounds nice, but I want healthcare. I don't want access, and I'm not interested in that. So she doesn't get it, in my opinion. Now we have Carolyn Long. She's the pro-establishment candidate. Her quote on healthcare: all Americans deserve access to affordable healthcare. How nice, affordable, the cost. We need to immediately repair the challenges presented by the Affordable Health Care Act, or excuse me, the Affordable Care Act, not Healthcare, Care Act. particularly as it relates to access to healthcare markets. Now, markets mean money. Once again, it's about the money. So she doesn't get it. Let's look at our next Dorothy Gasquet, I should say. Dorothy is one of my favorites as well on healthcare. Healthcare is a right for all people, regardless of their ability to pay. Nobody should go without proper medical care in such a prosperous country. Medicare for all. Yay, she gets it. Touchdown, Dorothy. Okay, our next candidate, Sarah Smith on healthcare. The United States should catch up to every other modern nation and implement a single-payer Medicare for all system. There's no reason why we can't be #1 in the world instead of number 37. Medicare for all today, single payer tomorrow. Well said, Sarah Smith. She gets it. And then we have, of course, Tamborine Borelli. You just heard from her. Tamborine on healthcare. The care in healthcare should be the primary focus of medical staff and patients. Hundreds of thousands are driven into bankruptcy due to healthcare costs. I stand solidly in favor of a single-payer insurance system, Medicare for all system. Way to go, Tamborine! Now, which one of these candidates do you think would best serve the public? I think you guys get it. We're looking at the progressives. The pro-establishments want to keep the status quo. They've had it for years. The Affordable Care Act, although it's solved a couple of issues, it didn't solve the problem of profiteering off the health and well-being of our nation's people. Not good, folks. Now, to point this out and to understand the magnitude of this issue and how we desperately need universal health care in this country, I want to offer this video segment, this interview from one of my favorite candidates, Amy Vilela in Nevada's 4th Congressional District. Now, John, if you could cue that up, it's just 3 minutes. And after that's over, I will close this segment out. And I want to thank everybody and wish them another Happy New Year. But please watch closely with Amy Vilela. She's my hero here. I don't think I could have maintained myself through this interview.
Sure, it is very inhumane. And you know, my daughter was 22 years of age. She had just moved to Las Vegas. We just had moved there ourselves, and she decided for some reason she wanted to move out to Vegas. And she was going to school to become an RN, and she had just enrolled in school. She was working 2 jobs as a CNA and was very self-sufficient. When she arrived, she had a red swollen leg. And we thought it's just from driving, you know. Was a CFO, not any medical field, and I thought, well, you know, give it some time, this should take care of itself. It continuously got worse, and then she fell. I was out of town, and I got a call, could hear her screaming, and they went to the emergency room. And, you know, we do have a law in place called EMTALA that requires them to see you, but they have found ways, because they're profit-driven, to work around that and give what's called wallet biopsies. They almost do their medical exams so as not to find anything. So she presented with a red swollen leg. My daughter was half African-American. She had sickle cell trait. She was a casual smoker. She had an injured knee and just driven 22 hours. They were all signs and symptoms of a blood clot. They immediately asked her when she got there, you know, do you have insurance? That's the first phone call I yielded, and I'm like, why are you calling me on this? Like, we'll deal with this later, just be seen. They had my husband calling up TRICARE, which he's in the military, so most people don't know that military personnel and active duty people are not covered the same way civilians are. Our children are not covered between the ages of 21 and 23 unless they are actively enrolled. And as she had just enrolled in school, this is how silly and ridiculous it is, and the semester had not started, she would not qualify to be on that insurance. She went in the back. I got another call. This time she's crying, and she's, Mommy, they're not helping me. And she begged for something for the pain and for some testing to see what was wrong with her leg. They told her specifically, go get insurance and see a specialist. We're not a doctor's office. And my daughter left there thinking that it was just something that she would have to do as soon as she could secure insurance and see a specialist. I had to do what no parent should have to do, and I had to hold her as she died in my arms of a pulmonary embolism. And it was totally unnecessary. And it was totally because as a CFO, I can tell you, I understand completely what goes on behind the scenes. They're doing risk management. They're talking about, patient payer mixes and how much they can afford of what type of, insurance. And just because you have insurance doesn't mean that it's a gold tier insurance, and you could still be susceptible to being discriminated against. And Shalene's not a one-off. She's not the first, and unfortunately, she won't be the last until we get people who have some guts and some balls into Congress and into the Senate and stand up for the American people and get profit out of healthcare.
Wow. Very powerful.
Yeah, for more stories about real people from their real life experiences and tragedies trying to obtain real health care, please go to Whole Washington Healthcare Stories. And I want to thank everybody again. It's been a great show, and I'll try and keep it as tight as I can. So if there's not any questions, I'll just hang out and listen. Thank you again.
Brian, were there any questions?
No questions for Oz, just some mad props and returns of the Happy New Year wishes.
Oh, thank you all for joining in today. It really makes us proud that we have a good audience forming out there. All right, so we've got Brian Cheeseman up next. Brian, you ready?
I'm ready.
Take it away.
All right. How's everybody doing? Happy New Year's. I'm able to get a better setup this time, so I'm able to participate in the chat a little better. So thank everybody for their questions. I'm going to be on here with Tyler again, and also I'm going to introduce Tamborine Borelli as well, and she's going to come on here championing Article the First. And welcome, Tyler and Tamborine. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, Ty.
What's up, Tam?
So, Tamborine, you are familiar with Article the First, correct?
Yes. Recently, as a matter of fact, it was brought to my attention in the past weeks, and it immediately piqued my interest just because the root of it is about representation. So right. I'm sure as we get into it and we explain to everyone what it actually is, I'm sure they will see it that way as well.
So knowing what you guys know, right? How does it change? How do you change running a campaign based on this type of a revelation? I mean, it's not necessarily the people, it's the representation. How does that change your campaign?
Tyler, do you want to go first, or?
Well, I wasn't going to run until it became clear that somebody needed to represent this thing. So this actually created my campaign. I'd rather hide under a rock, to be honest. But it's clear that that the people who put this country together had thought this out, and basically we got swindled. And so here we have the comments to our problems. And the work has been done, so we got to do it. So this, how has it changed my campaign? It created it. It's also going to change what district I'm going to run in. I will choose that based on this issue, and basically everything. This is the carrying point for my own campaign.
Right. And Tamborine, you've been running campaigns, right? Grassroots campaigns for a long time now. And compared to then to now, how does that change your campaign?
Well, I wouldn't say a long time.
Long enough to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if it changes it at all, it just, in my vantage point, it empowers it, because people are ready. They're ready, and tired. They're tired of the same platitude-filled, fork-tongue politician telling you what they know you want to hear. You know what I'm saying? And right. Then get into office and turn a deaf ear to you. So, and part of the reason why that happens is, for instance, in my district, 100,000 registered voters, right? So 300,000 actually voted. And you think, well, why didn't the other half vote? Because they're sick of putting their time and energy towards a representative that doesn't represent them. So this Article the First create the stranglehold that these so-called representatives have, because instead of one representative to every 600,000 people, representative for every 50,000 people. And also that will remedy, because, you know, obviously that's going to be a lot of people. Instead of one representative for the 10th, there'd be like 12. So the opposition might think that would be too many people there in DC.
And so there's
home to be here with the people.
Yes, it will. And there's also other fronts, correct? There's also Citizens United. That now, is this better than Citizens United? Because that's what I am kind of curious to know is, what is this going to do? Because it's an amendment, right? And it's in the court case. Tyler, you can also weigh in on this too. Is Article First a better solution than waiting to repeal Citizens United?
I wouldn't say better or worse. We just need to do both. The Article the First is a catch-all shotgun approach to fixing our entire democracy. It's basically, you know, the difference between an oligarchy and a republic is what we're trying to accomplish, and we did it. Our forefathers agreed upon this and did make the move. We just never actualized it. So we have the opportunity to do that. It would fix it because it would put the power back in the hands of the people, and we would have the ability, for example, to repeal Citizens United overnight, basically, because we would get we would get everybody a seat at the table, and it would become quite obvious very quickly that that was a good move. So I don't know that better or worse. I mean, I consider it better because we can fix so many of our problems with this move.
Right.
So yes.
So it's a bit of a multi-pronged approach as opposed to just the amendment.
Correct. This is more of a fundamental. I think of it as in like, when you go to the doctor, you talk about symptoms and problems, real root problems, and if you go tackling the symptoms, putting Band-Aids or giving you a Vicodin or whatever you're doing to solve the surface problem. You just go on having another create more problems. Right. So you look for what's at the root of the problem, and this solves the root of many of our problems.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we have any questions real quick in the audience before we wrap up?
No, nothing as of yet. Just agreement that it's messed up and it needs fixed.
True.
Sure does. Thanks. All right. Well, in that, I was going to kind of do more. We are running short on time. So thanks for being here, everybody. We will close this up. I know that there's books to check out. I wanted to put some shout outs out there for the Red Berets and Medicare for All. So they've got a march coming up.
Berets. Lord Fielding.
Love those guys.
Love you.
So thank you for everybody for your hard work in the revolution, and check out Article the First. It's very interesting. It does pertain to our political revolution, and it can do a lot to help us. So with that, Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year's.
New Year.
Thank you, guys. So our outro song today is from a local artist. They're from Fox Island, Washington. And it's called Wickline. The album is called Wake Up America. Everything we discussed about today is included in the descriptions below, so check them out. And thank you, John. Ready when you are. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Healthcare for all and all for one. Would someone please help me see why it works all around the world, but won't work for you and me? I know healthcare is big business, a big business that's quite healthy, but does it care about your health or making its investors wealthy? So what if losing everything you own is just a hospital visit away? Is putting profit before people become the American way? Just like big oil, big drug, and big insurance all agree. It's all about the money, They don't care about you and me. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time to wake up this nation. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time. Our tomorrows will depend on what we do today. Let need, not greed, lead the way. For every ill there is a pill, for which we're overcharged, except for one that brings relief for the hypocrisy at large. From those who protect life religiously from conception to a baby's birth, then ignore its health, safety, and welfare once it's born upon this earth. Children are being left behind as the Pentagon spends more, while millions have no health care and waste billions waging war. Corporate puppeteers pull the strings and chart the course as puppet politicians sell us out without remorse. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time to wake up this nation. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time. Our tomorrows will depend on what we do today. Let need, not greed, lead the way. Now there are those who truly believe you either have or you are had. Right is wrong and wrong is right, and the common good is bad. They want to privatize and profitize and corporatize our nation and make our government of the people a government of the corporation. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time to wake up this nation. Now's the time for we the people. Now's the time. Our tomorrows will depend on what we do today. Let need, not greed, lead the way. Let need, not greed, lead the way. Seems welfare is a dirty word when it helps the sick and needy, but rationalized when it's disguised as tax cuts, tax breaks, loopholes, subsidies, buyouts, and bailouts for the rich and corporate greedy.